Right. Okay. So my name's Simon Shaw. I know a few faces in the room, so it's nice to see you, and lots of people I don't know. Apologies if you've heard me speak before, because some of it I will cover, but I'll try and speed through some bits and concentrate on the new stuff that we're faced with. So what we're going to talk about is generally what is property income, because it's important to define that. The question I constantly get asked is, if I spend some money, am I repairing something or am I improving it? And that is 9 times out of 10, that's the question I get asked about let properties. I just realised I'm not putting my microphone on, so I thought you'd shout at me. So we'll cover that. Tax relief on interest, it's moved on a little bit in terms of there's not so many changes, where it's a pretty static period now, but again, it's a big cost of any property business, so we need to understand that. Limited company property businesses, still very, very topical, even with the exchange of rates. I've spoken to 2 people this week who are both asking that question, looking at portfolio, how should I be owning that? Should it be sole trader? Should it be joint ownership? Should it be a limited company? So that's still a question we're getting asked. And I think we're going to leave questions till the end, is that right? And deal with questions all together. Okay. So right at the beginning, these quotes are straight from the Revenue's business manual. What is a property business? And the lucky thing for us is that the Revenue are quite prescriptive as to what it is. And they do say it's a business. It's not an investment, it's a business. And they're taxed in such a way as if it were a business, which is quite useful for you as owners of properties, because the reliefs you get and the taxes you can offset are more advantageous than if it was treated as purely as an investment. And it also tells us that it's normally the person who carries on the rental business who gets taxed, which again is very, very important, because if you've got 2 people owning a property, then who pays the tax on that property? Or more than 2 people, who pays the tax on that property? So it's normally the person that's carrying on that business, and that very often is who actually legally owns it. If we've got married couples in the room, if you do own properties jointly and you want to split the income in some other way than 50-50, because that's the way the Revenue will go, you can make an election, but it has got to be a physical election. You've got to write to the Revenue and say, we wish this income to be taxed in these proportions, and give the reasons why. Otherwise, the Revenue will just say, it's 50-50, you're a married couple, that's it. So, you buy a house, property, and you think, right, we need to do a little bit of work on it. So what is a repair and what is an improvement? So again, these are quotes straight from the Revenue's website, straight from their manual, so if they ever throw a question at us, we can just throw straight back and say, well, this is what your manual says. So it talks about replacing parts of a whole asset. So the whole asset being the property, and those parts might be a tile on the roof. That's obviously, tile blows off, you put a new tile on, you've replaced parts, so that's obviously a repair. It also goes on to say there won't be a significant improvement of the asset beyond what it was before, so like for like. That doesn't mean that if you strip out a 30-year-old kitchen, you've got to put a 30-year-old kitchen back, because time moves on, fashion moves on, technology moves on, but you have got to be doing like for like. And what that means is that those replacements, those repairs, will come off the profit and therefore reduce your tax. Contrast that with what might be capital, and those costs will not come off your profit, will not reduce your tax bill, but what they'll do is they'll add to the value of the asset you've got. So if you ever sell that asset in however many years' time, that capital cost will be taken into account then. Just a quick side, something that's changed in the last few years is replacement of domestic items. So this is, we all know what domestic items is. It's furniture, it's beds, it's washing machines, it's all those things you might find in a kitchen or a bathroom. Where you are replacing those items, you can deduct those costs straight off your profits. You can't deduct the initial purchase of them, because that's a capital item, that's an asset. But if it breaks down, if it needs repairing, then you go along to Currys, buy your new washing machine, wheel it in for them. That's a replacement, so that cost can be offset. So back to capital costs. Capital cost is something that adds or improves the property. It's things that brings it into, so you imagine you buy a property, you've not rented it out before, and you look at it and you go, I've got to strip the kitchen out, I've got to strip the bathroom out, it needs a new wooden floor. All those types of things will normally be treated as an improvement rather than a repair. And it tends to be that if you've looked at it and go, that property's worth X, but it needs this work doing, so therefore I'm going to pay X minus something, that's where it tends to come into it. So it's where you almost had a discount, or the price you've paid has reflected the disrepair of the property. And that's why when you get your property in the first place, taking pictures of how you buy it, what it's there, before you do any work, take pictures. Because we can all get invoices from builders, we can all sit down 5 years later and say to the revenue, well, this is what I did. But if you take a picture, then that's factual. You know, there was a bathroom there before, I took the bathroom out, I replaced the bathroom. Yes, it's a nicer bathroom, but it's still a bathroom. That's a repair. So going back to capital, if you buy a property, so there's a change in ownership, and you do some work before you move a tenant in, then typically that would be a capital cost. So what I'd say to you is, looking at the agents, but you might buy a property that's perhaps in a bit of disrepair, and you might say to you, well, I'll move a tenant in there, and perhaps I'll lower the rent for a few months because there's going to be a bit of disruption, there's going to be builders coming around doing things, etc. But I'm going to replace the kitchen then, I'm going to replace the bathroom then. So you've had the tenant in there, so you're obviously repairing something that's as a result of the tenant using it, not as the fact that you've bought it in a certain state and have to repair it. So that might be, within reason. You can't say, well, I'm going to take the roof off when they've got a tenant in there, but you might be able to do certain works with tenants in place and therefore change what might be a capital cost into a repair cost. Tax relief on interest. Finally settled down. We're finally at the point where it's 20%. So it doesn't matter whether you're a high rate taxpayer, don't pay tax at all. When you calculate your profits as a property owner, you won't get that interest deducted from those profits if it's residential property. If it's commercial property, you will. With residential property, so you pay tax on the full rent minus the cost of running the property, and then as a credit, you get 20% tax relief on the interest. And you might say, well, I'm a low rate taxpayer, I'm a standard rate taxpayer, so it makes no odds. But it might make odds because it might actually push you into the high rate of tax because it's not coming off at the top, it's coming off at the bottom. So it might push you into the high rate of tax in the first place. People who are claiming child benefit, again, if you've over £50,000 income, you have to pay some of that child benefit back. Because the interest isn't coming off at the top of that line, it's coming down later, it might push you into that. So although for most people there won't be a big change in the tax they pay, in certain circumstances it can make a difference. So limited companies, well, thanks to everything that's happened, rates of tax are going up. So if you're lucky enough to have a company with over £250,000 worth of profit, you'll now be paying 25% tax. That's a 6% increase. It's one of the biggest increases I've seen in 30 years I've been working in the profession. It's going from 19 to 25%. If your profits are less than £50,000, you'll stick at the 19%. So that's no change. So the question is, what happens in between? And we're back to this thing we had about 10, 15 years ago, which is called marginal relief. And what that means is you'll pay a rate of tax somewhere between 19 and 25%. The closer you are to £250,000 worth of profits, the closer you'll pay to 25%. The closer you are to 50,000 per profits, you'll pay 19%. What that exact amount will be will depend where you are in that scale. We're also seeing income tax on dividends. So if you run a limited company and you want that money out of the limited company, one of the ways you can take it is by dividends, which is absolutely fine. But we've still got the £2,000 at 0%, but what we've now got is a 1.25% increase for all of the other rates. And that's very much in line with the national insurance increase that was announced to fund the NHS or whatever they're going to use the money for. So again, that makes taking dividends out more expensive than it was a year ago. But that comes in for April this year, although the corporation tax doesn't come until April 2023. So to give capital gains tax. As you probably know, as an individual, if you sell a property, you pay capital gains tax either at 18% or 28%. If that property is in a limited company, you pay it at the same rate as the company pays its trading profits. So again, that comes to be anywhere between 19 and 25%. And if you're owning properties privately, residential properties, please don't forget, if you do sell one, you've got 60 days to tell the revenue. It used to be 30 days, but they've now extended it to 60 days. You've got 60 days to tell the revenue you've sold it and to pay any tax that's due. So you can't wait until the end of the tax year. If you sell one in April 2022, you can't wait, say, well, I've got till January 23 to tell them. No, you've got to do it within 60 days and you've got to pay the tax. And if you don't, you'll get fined. There's daily fines for not doing that. So just going back to how you might run your business, whether it be own property privately or own property in a limited company, give you a quick example. You've got someone earning £40,000. They've got property profits of £20,000, typical of a lot of people. If they own that in their own names, the tax on the property element will be £6,000. If they own it in a limited company and take all the money out of the limited company as dividends, the tax will now be £6,525. So it's actually more expensive to have it in a limited company. But if you don't want that profit, if you're happy to leave that profit in the company to perhaps reinvest into future properties, to use as your deposit, then the corporation tax is only £3,800. So what I'm trying to show there is limited companies isn't right for everybody. It depends on what your personal income is, it depends on what profits you're going to make in the company, and really importantly, it depends what you're going to do with those profits. Are you going to leave those in the company, or do you need them to spend to personal spending, holidays, whatever you want to do with the cash? So that was very much a whistle tour. Do you want me to take questions now if there are any immediate questions, or do you want me to leave them until the end?
Yeah, if anyone's got any, let's go for it. It's nice to know what's happening.
Are there any burning questions following from that? Stunned everybody. Which is good, which hopefully means you understand it, or you've baffled you. But we'll take questions at the end, and I'll be around at the end. So if you've got any
stamp duty?
Stamp duty?
Yeah.
Not my expertise.
Well, if you transfer property into a limited company, you have to pay stamp duty again.
Well, because that was a whistle-top tour, the old idea, if you own properties currently, and you're looking at incorporating that into a portfolio, stamp duty, yes, you've got to pay stamp duty, certainly. Your bigger problem is your capital gains tax, because typically you might have had those properties and they've gained, and although there's no cash changing hands, or maybe a remortgage, but by incorporating them, because you're connected with yourself, your limited company is connected with you, that transfer has to be done at market value. So the chances are you'll end up with a capital gains tax bill and no cash to pay it, unless you remortgage and use the money that way. So I've only ever done one incorporation of a portfolio of properties, and we, either through luck or judgment, I'm not sure, we got it right. We did it at the right time, where we were in the market. Everyone I've looked at since that has been a disaster if they've done it, because that capital gains tax, and especially at the moment, as Abi no better than I am, but prices are quite, James is nodding as well, at quite a high. So if you decide to get those properties and put them into a limited company, you're going to have a capital gains tax bill and no cash to pay it with. So that's why most people I'm speaking to now are starting off with a limited company in the first place, because they might say, well, I've only got one at the moment, but when do you switch to a limited company? Is it the second one, the third one, the fourth one? At some point, you're going to be better off as a limited company. So at the moment, certainly don't incorporate. If you've got properties already in your ownership, leave them where they are. Is that answer your question?
Yeah, I only raised the point because it hadn't been raised.
Yeah, sure.
Because a lot of people don't realise that.
No, you're quite right
and
to
they
it.
get screwed for it.
Yeah. It is. Stamp duty is a transactional tax, and there's a transaction going on. And you might not be putting any money into the deal or getting any money out of the deal, but you're quite right to raise it, yeah. Anything else? I'll let James, leave you to James then. Thank you.
Ooh, dreadful. Hi everyone, I'm James, BB Mortgages. So we're based in Newark Marketplace, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about how the buy-to-let world is changing. What we've seen is that, I suppose 10 years ago, buy-to-let was something that people did in personal names, as Simon's talked about, and they maybe had one or two, and there wasn't a lot of regulation in the world, and the mortgages were very vanilla. So you got them from high street lenders, Halifax, Birmingham Midshires, Nationwide, whatever, and they're all very standardised. And that's moved on hugely, a lot of it because of the tax changes that have come into force through the years. So what I'm seeing is a lot of landlords coming to me looking for different things, so higher yields, bigger returns, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how the sort of things that we've come up against this year over the last couple of years, and how we've found the mortgage solutions that suit those requirements for bigger yields. So just to give you a few examples really. Holiday lets. I don't know if anyone in here has got a holiday let, but you'll have seen that's quite big in the news at the moment with Airbnb, Booking.com, that kind of thing. For a long time, lenders didn't want to entertain that kind of mortgage. They didn't like the fact that there was no legal agreement between the tenant and the owner, and there wasn't really a product for it. But now we've found that there's a lot more people coming into that marketplace. A lot of building societies will do it, and specialist lenders. So whether you're looking for something local, where you might be renting it to wedding guests, for example, at Kelham, or if it's Norfolk, Cornwall, that kind of thing, there's lenders out there. They'll do it in an SPV, which Simon will advise on, or you can do it in your own personal name. Rates are typically a little bit higher, and the way they assess affordability is based on the yield on a low season, mid-season, and a higher season. But typically they're quite generous on that, and that's up to sort of 75–80%. So because of the recent lockdowns and things like that, because people can't go away, there's been a real increase in the appetite for that kind of thing, with people staying in the UK for holidays. HMO, I'm sure you're all familiar with the HMO model, which I think has become very much more professional, and I think you'll probably talk a little bit about that. That, you know, it used to be buy a big house, just rent the rooms out, collect the cash on the Friday, and that was it really. But the demand is a lot higher. Young people want to rent a room, but they want a nice room now. They don't just want, you know, like a student type room. That there's a bigger appetite for it. So one example of something we achieved last year. So I had a client come to me, bought a shop. It was on a main road in Nottingham, and he converted that into 9 self-contained ensuite rooms with a communal kitchen, some outside space, etc. So when you talk to lenders about a 9-bedroom HMO, there's a lot of lenders that say, we don't want to entertain that. It's too risky, 9 different tenants in there. So there's not a big appetite for it. But there's lenders out there that will do it. And there's this grey area now between what a mortgage broker does and what a commercial broker does. This sort of hybrid thing really, where you've got semi-commercial sort of investment with big HMOs or blocks of flats or things with a little bit of commercial attached to them. So there is a real a real appetite out there from the specialist lenders to do the bigger HMO type model. And then I can help with the purchase and the conversion. So again, there's lenders out there that will assist you in buying it and assist with the funding of the conversion and then the exit into a standard mortgage afterwards. Something that you talked about, serving corporations, so Simon's poo-pooed it a little bit, but I have had people doing it, whether they're incorporating 1 or 2 or whole portfolios. So I've recently done something with about 20. We did one big loan with a high street bank, incorporated the entire portfolio. And there was a bit of an element of the tax, income tax, etc., but also the legacy planning as well, with inheritance tax and things like that. Obviously Simon will be able to model how that looks and what the liability is, but there is an appetite out there for people to do it, but you need to be aware of the stamp duty, capital gains tax etc. And I suppose that brings us on to limited company. You know, limited company mortgages are more and more popular. So a lot of clients will ring me and say, do I buy it in my own name or do I buy it in a limited company? And whilst I've got an understanding of it, you know, it's an accountant's answer, but I think you can quite simply put the two figures next to each other and see which one's the best. The issue with limited company is it's more expensive. So, you know, your typical buy-to-let rate might be 1.5%. Your typical limited company rate's probably 2.5 to 3.5. There's legal fees to capture because you've got to pay your legal fees and the lender's legal fees, and your personal guarantees as well. So there's a lot of factors involved in making that decision. But I can give you an assessment of if you're buying a personal name, it'll cost you this. Buying a limited company, it'll cost you that. But it's important to understand it. But I think the key from what you were saying, Simon, is it's about longevity. You know, how many do you want, and what do you intend to do with the money? You know, if you're buying lots and you want it as a business, then it seems that the company option is the most appropriate. And I suppose the other thing that we've done quite a lot of recently is properties that need refurbishment. So Simon talks about improvement or repair. So a number of lenders will come out with new products where they will give you the entrance into that property and the exit out of that property. So if your model is buy something that needs a kitchen, a bathroom, and then exit it and withdraw any money that you can, there's products set up for that. So bridge to let as it's known. So the lender will give you the product to buy it, a bridging loan up to 75% of its purchase price, and they will underwrite the value on exit as well. So you do the work and then you instantly get the remortgage, so you don't have to wait a certain period of time before you exit that property. So a lot of my clients that's their business model. They'll do 3 or 4 a year, and they're just recycling the same amount of money throughout the process. I suppose a few sort of other updates and things like that. This is the year that's predicted to be the biggest remortgage year ever. So if you've got mortgages that are maturing this year, you're not on your own. And now's the time to sort of review it. Make sure you do it with lots of time. Legal work's taking longer, valuations are taking longer, underwriting's taking longer because of COVID, the size of your portfolio, and so on and so forth. So now's a good time to review that. And then just talking a little bit about underwriting. So the demands from lenders on buy-to-let, it's more like it is with a residential mortgage. You know, they want to know your income, they want to know what your bank statements look like. But if you've got portfolios, lenders are asking for portfolio statements, cash flow statements, business plans, accounts for limited companies. So there's a lot more paperwork involved, which is where the need for a broker comes into the becomes more and more important, because we can guide you through that, help you get the paperwork you need from Simon, as well as preparing the paperwork for the lender. So that's me. So we do the buy-to-let and the residential side of things, based in Newark, and obviously we'll send you out all the contact details if we can assess anything that you want us to. Thank you.
Should be funny. I've not seen it.
Hi everyone, it's Daniel from Buttercross Estates, and I'm very sorry that I'm not able to make it this evening. I came down with a cold last couple of days and salt tour, the first time I have in 2 years as well. That coincides with our event this evening. Pre-COVID have been fine, but obviously times have changed, so I thought I'd give it a miss this evening. Luckily you're in very capable hands. I've got a great team there to run things, and I'm very happy about that. So you can have a lovely evening. Thank you to James and Simon for coming down as well tonight to share their wisdom alongside Abi. And should be a good event. All the proceeds of tonight is going to go towards a laptop for a local school. It's going to be donated to the Computers for Schools campaign run by Stephen Brown. We've got 2 already that we're going to give away next week, so it should make up a 3rd one, which we're really happy about. So thank you for that. I'll catch up with you all the next couple of days, and look forward to speaking to you then. In the meantime, thanks very much, and I'll hand over to Abi.
Right. Here's on, is it? I wasn't sure if it gone flat. Okay, excuse you. Okie dokie, so bear with me. It's the first time doing this one, so I apologise if I mess up anywhere. So yeah, if anyone doesn't know me, my name's Abi, and I work for Buttercross Estates as the Senior Portfolio Manager. Here we go. So I thought I'd just do a little bit about me. So I've been doing this for the last 5 and a bit years. I actually started in the motor trade, but just fancied a change, missed the people. So now I have landlords and tenants instead. Since then, the company has grown there quite a lot since I started like those 5-6 years ago. We've now gone from 2 to 5, and my colleagues are dotted at the back. So we've got Freya, who recently qualified, and she's our portfolio manager. And we've got Pippa, that is our sales admin, and we've got Ross, who does our marketing, although who is agreeably doing a runner on us in just a few weeks' time. A week today, there we go. So yes, between us all, yeah, we look after everything. And it certainly keeps us busy, doesn't it? So yeah, I thought really, wasn't sure on everyone's different levels of what you knew, so I thought we'd just do like a little bit of a quick like update and just see how much everybody knew what was going on. Oh, there you go, I've already started talking about me. So yeah, we've got 230 tenancies, and I know we did discuss, or somebody mentioned, where's James gone? He's there. Yeah, holiday lets. Yeah, we've got a few of those now, and that's actually proving to be really, really popular for anyone that is thinking about those. It seems to keep Pippa very busy looking after them, especially with weddings. As you said, we've got one over at the Castlegate, which is doing really well. But yes, I'll not dwell on us too much. We'll talk about what else is going on instead. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes, mostly just COVID, that has made a big difference. But yeah, in the last year, we've had rent increases up by 9%, and we're noticing it on just about everything. It doesn't seem to really matter what the property is, it's just going up. We've had a lot of people though, since working from home, I think seems to have mattered, and being locked in with your relatives seems to have driven everybody nuts. So everyone seems to be moving up and sort of wanting to be further away from the cities and just bigger properties with more space. So we are noticing that more. We're getting a lot more applicants per property now than we were as well before COVID. I need to stop saying COVID, before COVID. So yeah, we are noticing that. So it's a really good time to be a landlord from that perspective, because you've got a really nice choice of tenants. And that sounds terrible, but you do have more of a choice now. And as it says on there, the prices in Newark have actually shot up as well in the last year. It was, in the paper actually, it's the second highest in the UK that has gone up, so it's actually gone up by 20%. So not obviously, it's great to be selling things, but if you want to sell, it's a really good time to be selling. That seems to be the case. But there's just still nowhere near enough. I can't comment too much on the sales, but certainly for rental side, there's nowhere near enough properties for the amount of tenants that we actually have. And it's not like they're not good tenants, it's just, there just aren't enough. In general, I think between the move up and people wanting more space, and just people changing jobs and families growing, that demand for like 2-3 bedroom properties is just higher, I think, than probably we've ever seen it. So, a little 101. So as I say, I apologise if I'm teaching anybody how to suck eggs. It's more just a brief, if you do already know, not to worry about it. So it's just that you know what you've absolutely got to have before you really can rent out a property. So an EPC, which I'm sure plenty of you have heard of, is an energy performance certificate. That'll last you 10 years and needs to be an E and above at the moment. Gas safety certificate lasts you a year. That's got to be done by a gas safe registered engineer. And then you've got your July last year. July the year before, if it was one that was a new one. If it was an existing tenancy, it was actually from April last year. So essentially, you've had plenty of time to get them done. If you haven't had them done, chop chop, because there is a 30 grand fine if you haven't had them done. At the minute, the one that I've seen, bless it, that has been the least successful when it has had a check was 31 advisories. So I'll be very impressed if you can get more than that. I hope you don't. So yeah, those need to be dealt with and sorted in 28 days, but you'll always be told if it's anything more serious, and then it needs to be done a little bit quicker. The How to Rent guide is free. You don't have to renew that or anything, so that's a good one. You just get that off the government website, and it sounds really daft, but that's just one of the simple things you've got to make sure you give to your tenants before they move in. Right to rent is exactly as it sounds. You just need to make sure your tenants have got the right to rent into the UK. It was a little bit more simple leaving the EU, because you literally could just check people's ID cards, and as long as it said they were a part of the EU, it wasn't a problem. Further afield hasn't changed. They have to make sure they've got a visa, but now from July last year, you've got to check that they are actually allowed to be here. So essentially, if you're not a British citizen, you need to check, and you'll need to check they've got a visa as well. But on the plus side, you can do that online. You haven't necessarily got to have bits of paper for that, but you have got to make sure, and just make sure you prove all of this. So like us in particular, we'll get the tenants to sign to say they have had all of those things. And so there's no question at the end of a tenancy, or if you need to ask them to leave for any reason, as to whether or not they have had it. So evidence is key on that one, because it could save you quite a lot of money. If you don't check on a right to rent, by the way, it could cost you an unlimited fine or even 5 years in jail. So for something quite simple, it's actually got quite a nasty knock-on effect. So deposits, again, for those of you who might not know, when the tenant fee ban hit in June 2020, they put a deposit cap in. So if you had a 6-week or 7-week or whatever, technically you fancied, because there was actually no cap on it, you shouldn't have had it any more than that now. So if you did have maybe a fixed term that's gone into a periodic tenancy, just maybe double check that, because if it hadn't got a specific term in it, you may find you need to give the extra back, maybe just before your tenant realises. So yeah, that's capped at 5 weeks. Even if you've got a pet deposit, the whole thing needs to still only be 5 weeks. So as it says on there, it has got to register within 30 days. So that's from receipt. So like if you use a letting agent through us and then you're a let-only landlord and you've got to then register afterwards, the date is from the date we get it, not from the date that you get it. So just be mindful of that, because that can get you in a pickle as well. You've then got the choice of whether you actually want to insure it or, and I call it custodial, I should basically just say, you just give it to them. So you've got a choice of 3 different companies that you are, I say companies, accredited schemes that you can use to register your deposit with. You've got My Deposits, TDS and DPS. Entirely up to you. Custodial is free, you just send it off to them and they'll hold on to it for you. They're kind of like a third party. Or you can go to the insured option, which is what we do, which means you hold on to it, you pay a small fee, and then it's actually really handy when it comes to the end of your tenancy, because you've got no middleman. You can literally just sort of deal with it on a negotiation basis of, right, you can have this much back or whatever, and you can send it back straight away. You don't have to wait the several weeks it takes to go through this adjudication process. What we have found has worked quite well for those of you that can't take the extra pet deposit, which is not ideal, but we are said sort of maybe charge a little bit extra for can't get that out, can I? Extra rent even for pets. So we just charge an extra £15 a month, and the idea with that is that you just sort of keep that to one side. Don't kind of take it as my rent is now, let's say, £675 instead of £660. The idea is you kind of just put that to one side, and if they've got any like additional damage following having a pet, you kind of hold on to that pot, as opposed to then sort of going for it at the end quite so much. Now, with all this, as long as you register all right and do that on there, and you also make sure you give the prescribed information, which sounds daft if you don't know about it, but that is an essential part, and it basically explains to tenants where their money goes and who has got it and like who your landlord is and those sort of things. So you've got to make sure they have that, and you give them any other information that's needed by the company. As long as you do all of that, you will be fine. If you do it wrong or you don't register it, you are liable for 3 times the amount of deposit for every time you haven't done it. So like if you renewed your tenancy, let's say 3 or 4 times, and you'd never done it right, you could get hit for that fine all 3 or 4 times should your tenant find out you didn't register it. So just something to be mindful of. There are some very savvy tenants. So I thought I'd then just have a quick chat about inventories. So basically, if you're going to take a deposit, do an inventory. There is no point taking a deposit if you're not going to do an inventory, and make it a half decent one too. And I only say that because if you don't have something that's documenting the condition of the property at the beginning, how on earth can you prove at the end how it looked? So it's really, really important that you get something half decent. You can do it yourself. There's plenty of apps out there if you've got the spare time to do it. If you don't want to, there's plenty of companies that can just do it for you. And again, like I say, you'll come to the end, you'll do your checkout report as well. Simple stuff, just document how it was looking, get a few photos, and it just means then when you get to the end, you've got an absolute clear cut, no argument. Tenant burnt that hole in the carpet because it wasn't there at the beginning, for example. So sounds daft, but definitely worth doing. As we've just said about rent increases, that's happened in general for those properties when they become vacant, but some of you might be thinking about doing it now your tenant's been in for a little while. It's always the one of, is it worth doing if you've got a really good tenant? Is it worth upsetting the apple cart? That's only really a decision that you can make, because you're never going to please anyone when you give them a rent increase, so no one's ever going to be chuffed, are they, no matter how much it is. So you've got a couple of options. So you can do a Section 13 form, which is just a government form. You can download it online, you fill it in, and you stipulate how much you want to put it up by and how long it's going to be until it goes up. As a minimum, though, you've got to do at least a month's notice. And it's a very similar thing with negotiation, except rather than the form, you just have a chat with your tenants, agree an amount, make sure you document it, and just say it's going up in a month's time by X amount. And just update your standing order mandate. The only downside to those choices are your tenant can argue it. So if they're not happy with the amount you've tried to put it up by, they can take it to tribunal. Agreeably, they've only got until like the date it's due to be paid, but nevertheless, it is something there. Now, the best one is the bottom one. And it's something as of recently we have decided we're just doing going forward in general, just really because of the steep increase on rent values. If you put it in the tenancy before it's even started, your tenant cannot actually contest it. That sounds awful, but they can't. So if you put in there, I don't know, over the next 12 months or after 12 months, we will be reviewing your tenancy by tenancy amount by £25 or 5% or whatever. You can then literally just message them, email them, call them, whatever, to say, right, Mr. So-and-so, we're going to be putting up your rent by 5% as agreed from this date. And you don't actually have to give them notice. I would recommend that you do out of politeness, because nobody's going to appreciate you saying, oh, next payment, which is in 2 weeks' time, I want another, whatever it is, 25, 30 quid a month. So it's best practice to give them a bit of notice, but that is the best one if you are looking at that going forward. And like I say, it's something we're going to be putting our tenancies that are definitely going to be going up anything between 2 and 5%. Be careful though on how much you put it up by the way. You can't just go for it. You can, I would say between 2 and 5% is a good spot. You could push it all the way up to 8, but 5 is a fair region to be in without your tenants getting a bit hacked off. And it's like anything, like I say, no one's going to be pleased to get told their rent is going up. So a void period could cost you a lot more than that extra 25, 30 quid a month. But if you're not fussed about keeping your tenant, then it probably doesn't matter. But that's entirely up to you. It's just trying to weigh it up, that's all. This is super brief. I'm not going to go over this too much. So Section 21s, Section 8s, there are 2 different types of eviction. Section 21 is a non-fault eviction, and as you may have seen throughout the news at the time, when everything was going off with COVID, they did extend those. So there was, unfortunately, 6 months you had to wait or give your tenants before they had to leave. It's now gone back to 2 months again, so it's just sort of standard now. Same with the Section 8, they've all gone back to normal now. Section 8 you would use, of course, if you had an actual issue, and you would use that if you were in a fixed term of a tenancy. I don't know, say your tenant stopped paying the rent for more than 2 months. That's a really good one if we're only sort of like a couple months in and you're already having problems. So that's now back to anything between nothing and 2 months. There is only one ground, by the way, that is no months at all, but the vast majority are between 2 weeks and 2 months on that front. Which leads me on to the sad news that Section 21 is going, which you may have heard about a couple of years ago. Before COVID hit, we did talk about it then, and we expected it to be about 4 or 5 years away. And that's pretty much ties in with now. We reckon it's about 2 or 3 years away. And they're kind of following suit with what Scotland have done, which is they want to remove this whole no-fault eviction, because theoretically, I guess if you had a bad day and you wanted to just evict your tenant, you could. Theoretically, you wouldn't, but you could. And I think that's what they're aware of, is that just you can just ask your tenant to leave. So they are looking at removing that, and the idea is that you can only ask your tenant to leave for a genuine reason. So they are looking at expanding the amount of grounds that you've got an option for, to try and cover landlords a little bit more, so you're not quite so vulnerable. And they're looking at doing like a specialist housing court, because again, at the moment, it's taking such a long time to gain possession through Section 8, because you've got to go through the court. They're looking at making that a little bit more, like I say, secure for people, so it shouldn't be taking anywhere near as long. Because if you want to move back into your home, for example, you're kind of stuck. And there are those poor accidental landlords who you've just kind of thought you might have inherited it, which may be more unlucky, I guess, depends how you look at it, if you are stuck with a tenant that actually you don't want in there. And then there's those people that, you just sort of might get a new partner and you decide, actually, I'll just rent that out, and you just sort of wing it and see how you go with it. So that is just something to be aware of, that going forward, you be super careful on your referencing, just to make sure, you've been as careful as you can to get yourself a good tenant in there. So in terms of what's now changing, there hasn't been a huge amount because of lovely COVID, so they've not really had a lot of time to keep changing stuff. So you may have all heard about the EPCs going up. So of course, at the moment, it's near above. That's been like that for quite some time now, since 2018. So yeah, that's been there for a bit. You need to make sure, essentially, if it's not an near above, you've done, can't think of the word now, an exemption notice. So as long as you've done that, you'll be fine. If you haven't, you need to make sure you get that implemented, because you're just leaving yourself open to a lot of fines if they find out. Actually, anything up to £150,000 if you have, dependent on how long you've been doing it for, if they find you've not put an exemption notice in. And it actually doesn't take that long either. It's really not too bad. But the plan is, of course, to come up to a C, which is going to be difficult, I think, for a lot of people and a lot of properties. So the plan is, for anything new, it's 2025, and it's 2028 for any existing properties. Now, there is a cap to that. So they have said it's up to £3,500. They're not just going to tell you need to kit out your entire house to get it up there and still find it doesn't reach. So, yeah. If you then do that, they basically said you need to spend the £3,500 in general, you need to pay for that. Make sure you've done everything you can to get it to that point, and only then can you then put your exemption notice in, because you need to have at least tried. And leading on from that, you need to then redo that every 5 years. So it's not just like, that's it, done, you never have to try and do anything about it. Every 5 years, you need to put your case forward as to why you then haven't had to do it again. The few exemptions are things like, if it's a listed building, so if it's going to change the structure or the visual, sorry, I can't think of the right word, of the property in a negative way, then they would say that's fair. Again, if it's going to reduce the value of your property by more than 5%, again, that's deemed as an exemption. And even if you sort of inherited it, let's say like we've just spoken about, and they'll give you 6 months to get it sorted out. So there are options, but you need to explore those in depth if you are looking at getting something new from that side of things. The last one that's due to change is just some point this year. We don't know when. It's just carbon monoxide detectors. Some of you might have been putting them in already, or might even just have them anyway. But we have been doing it for about the last 12 to 18 months, just getting them installed at the same time as the gas safety checks are done. Because we're expecting it to be very much like it was with the smoke alarms in 2015, which is, right, fit them, you've got a month, do it, or else kind of thing. So it is, as it says in there, it's for all gas appliances, just apart from gas hobs. I don't know why it's not gas hobs, because it's still gas, but it's not gas hobs. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that one. That's one less to deal with. So for me, that's everything. Any questions?